Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Patch Tuesday Time Bomb webcast. We're going to begin in just a few short moments. Before we do, I'd like to remind all attendees that they're in listen-only mode, but please feel free to use the questions box or chat feature to ask questions at any point during the webcast, and the panel will answer them during the Q&A session. With that, I would like to hand it over to Ashley Leonard.
Thanks, Heidi. We'd like to welcome everyone to the webcast today. My name is Ashley Leonard. I'm one of the founders of Syxsense, and we're very glad you took a few minutes to join us today for the webcast. I'd like to start today just by wishing that everyone's family, friends, and colleagues are healthy and well. These are obviously very unusual times at the moment that we're dealing with, and so our thoughts are with everyone as we adjust to the new reality that we are seeing outside today. Okay, we have a panel that is with us today. So I'd like to start off today's webcast by just introducing our panel. And actually, I'm going to ask Rob Brown to introduce himself. Rob.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name's Rob, and I'm the Director of Services from our UK head office, currently working from home. My team is responsible for the delivery of the security solutions, one of them being patch management. And over the last 15 or so years, we've deployed over 200 million patches globally. And I'm here to learn as much as you are, so please ask as many questions as you like. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Welcome. Okay, Diane Rogers.
Hi, everyone. I'm Diane, and I've been in software development for a very long time. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Syxsense. I came from working on the original versions of Shockwave Flash, Dreamweaver at Adobe, and I started my career at Borland working on the C++ compilers, Delphi, Paradox, DBase, all of that.
Excellent. And John Cassell.
Hey everyone, John Cassell, Senior Solutions Architect at Syxsense. I've been in IT for just about 15 years, working in desktop and server operations, as well as some DevOps. At Syxsense, I dabble in different areas such as onboarding, training, pre-sales, and community management.
All right, well, welcome panel. Excited to have you with us today and to get some of your insights as we talk about the Patch Tuesday Time Bomb. For those of you that are not familiar with Syxsense, I just very briefly would like to introduce who we are. So Syxsense Software, one of the pioneers in cloud-based IT systems management and security solutions, including patching, security scanning, endpoint management, and remediation, all delivered from the cloud for endpoints such as Windows, Mac, Linux devices, wherever they may be in the cloud, on-prem, or now in our new reality at home. So that's who we are as an organization, and we've been in the space for many, many years. So let's get into kind of the main content of today. You were obviously dealing with a new reality for IT systems management and patching, and that is that our attack surface has changed quite radically. We've moved from having devices primarily in our corporate offices to being highly distributed in people's homes, and that is going to create a lot of challenges for organizations when it comes to patching and securing those devices. John, could you tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are on the challenges that you're seeing with many clients as their corporate devices are now deployed at home?
Yeah, absolutely. There have been some major shifts in the industry, especially with this unprecedented event, not just within the industry, but of course, every industry. What we've seen is that typically organizations that were somewhat prepared with some solutions such as VPN, the ability to allow devices to still be managed, well, there's still some major shifts. Those have typically only been utilized for executives and certain members of different departments where they can go ahead and remote back in, or they can still be managed remotely. For some others, such as bring your own device, using that model, it's just as tricky. There's just simply nothing there to really manage these machines. And the biggest concern is really the data. Where is it going? Is it being compromised? As well as remote assistance and patching itself. Not having a solution available makes it extremely tricky.
Thanks, John. Diane, with all these corporate devices now on the home network, I must assume that we've kind of got a lot of new risks, not only from the devices themselves, but also other devices that are on the home networks potentially. Can you comment a little bit on that for me?
Yeah, sure. So your attack surface has gotten so much bigger because it's not just getting into your own device, it's getting into any other device that's on your network at home, if it's your son's or your wife's, your husband's. And what a hacker's looking for is any sort of foothold where they can pivot from a device in the house and move to another one. So if someone gets in on a separate device, they'll jump over onto yours and eventually look for a way to get into your corporate assets. So you want to go ahead and not give them that foothold to exploit. You want to be able to do not just a patch scan, which shows you maybe 40% of what hackers are exploiting, but also be able to do a security scan, double check and see if you have OS misconfigurations, or if you have user accounts that aren't set up with adequate credentials. There's a quick way to do scans on that to prevent the user from pivoting.
Excellent. So, being at home, then what you're saying, I think, is that if you have maybe your children visiting torrent sites, for example, their potential exposure on their computer could be a gateway through to the corporate network via VPN. So we've got a whole new world that we're having to deal with. So I'm assuming as well that organizations that don't use VPNs are still exposed because they're accessing data maybe in Office 365. Any thoughts about that, John?
Companies that don't have VPN, it's extremely tricky because some in the industry have actually opened up their own firewalls to allow this kind of connection to occur. So the machines can still be managed. And unfortunately, and just looking at some statistics across different aspects, forums, social media, from MSPs and from IT administrators themselves, is that some aren't even qualified to make these major changes towards the environment. And that is extremely tricky. Of course, going with anything that doesn't require these changes would be a much more secure method. And almost any product out there that does offer some kind of cloud-based approach is always going to be secure.
Okay, thank you. Rob, I've heard that one of the approaches that organizations are making at the moment to help secure all these home users is they're setting up virtual machines in Azure or in AWS and using them as kind of jump points to access corporate data. Can you comment a little bit about how you're seeing that mode of securing your users developing?
Yeah, we're actually helping one of our global media and entertainment customers to help them to move to virtual desktops in the cloud. This strategy actually is very fashionable right now because you're actually moving your devices from traditional laptops, desktops, work from home to actually having an environment up in the cloud where you can have your configuration and security. But this actually means that you now have to manage two devices because the physical device you're using still needs to be protected. It still is an entry point into that virtual device in the cloud. Now, we heard last week that Microsoft were at capacity for virtual desktops in the cloud. So Azure was actually at capacity just last week. or near to capacity, and they're actually ramping up with new data centers around the globe to cope.
Yeah, I'm sure with everything going on, a lot of people are moving very rapidly to the cloud, and that's got to be creating a lot of challenges for Microsoft and Amazon as well. So interesting to hear that. Be interesting to see how that develops. Excellent, thank you. Now, remote desktop protocol is also commonly being used to access computers, maybe that are still back at the office. Anyone like to comment about how they are seeing this develop?
Oh. Remote desktop services, which includes RDP, it's often a favorite hacker vulnerability. It's used to infect ransomware. This can, however, be secured somewhat. So it is possible to, in a small way, secure it with encryption. However, many customers are still using the default port for remote for RDP, 3389, I think it is, which, if you know, can be brute forced. So if they're using the default port, you can actually brute force a device from anywhere, including devices working from home.
Yeah, John.
Yeah, definitely going off. That is one of the main, classic attack vectors using RDP or any form of it. Patching devices, of course, there are always patches being released to secure RDP, RPC commands, anything that can potentially be vulnerable from a machine on the same network or outside the network. And there are still ways to secure that method, but really the only method to allow RDP externally is, of course, one, to change the port, but then set up intermediary servers to transfer that authorization through, and setting up new certificates and things that maybe not, again, anyone in the industry really knows how to do, and now they're being forced to set that up. And the big question is it done properly?
I would imagine two-factor as well is going to be an important important item to install, right? I know we use two-factor authentication very heavily in our organization. Excellent. Well, thank you. Now, let's kind of turn our attention to some of the challenges of patching devices in what's now a highly distributed environment, with everyone being at home. So obviously, Microsoft typically is the main supplier of patches, at least for the operating systems, although we have to worry about third-party patches as well. But let's start with talking a little bit about Microsoft's Patch Tuesday strategy. Rob, maybe you could talk a little bit about how Microsoft organizes Patch Tuesday and some of the changes that Microsoft is making to Patch Tuesday, which will help us all while we're dealing with everyone working from home.
Yeah, so we actually heard a couple of weeks ago, but they announced it only last week, that they're actually changing the frequency, or they're suspending, sorry, the lowest severity patches that they release in a Patch Tuesday cycle. And they're doing this to help the roaming users and home users from that potential network burden. Here in the UK, it's not so important, as usually we have unlimited home broadband, but this is particularly important if you have a tariff-based system for your home broadband.
And I'm assuming, well, Rob, maybe you could comment a little bit about the sizes of a typical Patch Tuesday update and some of the issues that that's going to create.
Okay, so I'm sure everyone knows Patch Tuesday is the frequency that Microsoft releases their patches, and typically that is the second Tuesday of each month. Those updates focus on security updates. over the last 3 to 4 months, we've seen the average combined size anywhere between 1.5 and 1.6 gigabytes. And that does mean that each device across your whole environment will be downloading that each and every month just to keep basic Patch Tuesday updates. And we obviously haven't talked about the first Patch Tuesday of the month.
So the second Tuesday every month, Microsoft releases their Windows updates. You alluded there to the first Patch Tuesday of each month. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so this is actually quite news to a lot of our customers when we mention that Microsoft actually has a Patch Tuesday other than the second one. The very first Patch Tuesday starts in the first Tuesday of each month, and that's when they release Microsoft Office updates and .NET Framework updates. These are normally product enhancements, however, so they're not really the major security updates to products. They generally carry a severity of NA or low, but they still pack a punch. They are maybe one gig or more just for the Microsoft Office updates. So if you combine the two, you're looking anywhere between 2.5 and 3 gigabytes, potentially down your VPN or down your home network.
Wow. So what are some of the things that organizations should be thinking about when they're pushing that amount of data potentially down their VPN?
Until now, as John mentioned, VPN access was really reserved for company executives and specialized IT staff, those staff that need to connect in for support, consultancy, things like that. Now, until now, a lot of our clients that are talking to us, they only designed their VPN system to maybe cater for 20% of their IT staff concurrently. That's very important that you have that word, that concurrent staff. They can handle hundreds of users, but maybe only 20 at once due to the license. Now, what we're trying to do is we're helping one of our UK mission critical food producers to provide a patching solution for 200% of those VPN users. So, and without buying any extra VPN licenses. There's definitely challenges, but there's an opportunity using the cloud to get around this VPN issue.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Obviously, if you're using a cloud type solution, you're not going to have these same types of limitations through the VPN with traffic. But many people, as we know, are still using legacy premise-based solutions or potentially using WSUS to do their patching, and obviously that's going to create some issues for those organizations as we're talking about moving these amounts of traffic through the VPN. What about organizations, would anyone like to comment about organizations that are not using VPNs and what some of the challenges they may have when it comes to patching? John?
Typically, companies that aren't going to be using VPN might be using and leveraging automatic updates for patching alone, and that can be exceptionally tricky, especially based on what Rob said about the fact that there are multiple releases of content, and not all of this content is really necessary. If you're only concerned about the security updates, it's going to be a much smaller number. If you go with automatic updates, there are no classifications. There is no granularity to it. You're just going to allow every update to be delivered, although it may not be directly from the corporate network. So the environment overall, corporate environment, is not going to be affected so much. Every update's going to be brought down. And as we all know, with deploying any update, without really vetting them first and going through a proper phased approach, you could be introducing more problems on these machines, which then leads to more tickets.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that probably takes us on to a question for Rob. I know you've deployed millions and millions of patches across your career. Could you comment maybe a little bit about a kind of smart patching strategy that organizations should be thinking about now with the challenge of everyone being at home?
Yeah, okay. So how do you design a sophisticated patching strategy? You could use the vendor severity, and that traditionally is how a lot of our customers who come to us to ask for a strategy are doing it. They're simply choosing based on the vendor severity and the most exposure, and those are the ones that they're deploying in a 1 month behind strategy. So they're going with everything that is critical, as an example, that was released last month. And that is because of the challenge they have with the resources internally to perform the testing on the devices without deploying updates from the current month. Now, that strategy to use the vendor severity doesn't work. It really doesn't work, because the vendor often releases the severities based on what they perceive the danger to be and not actually what the danger really is. And years ago, the CVSS score, the specific scoring, a rating system from 0 to 10 was released. And we are using that as well as the vendor severity to offer some improved selection criteria for what you decide to deploy. And so when you combine the two, you have a better awareness of what ones you should be targeting first. But there are some other things as well that you ought to be thinking about.
Excellent, thank you. Kind of moving on, with everyone being remote, communication to our end users, our customers, is vitally important. Rob, do you have any comments on kind of what you see around best practices in user communications, maybe how to handle things like reboots, etc.?
Yeah, and this is something that our team is working with our clients. We're hearing a lot of experiences from our clients that are speaking with us to change how we are communicating the experience of working from home. There's a huge amount of anxiety throughout the workforce when they're trying to work from home. They've been provided a laptop or access into the system. They're trying to be as productive as possible as when they were office-based. And there are users now working from home, potentially even using VPNs, that aren't cyber IT aware. They're really not. Now, those users shouldn't take for granted the importance of securing their system, and actually we shouldn't either. The fact that we shouldn't hinder their work priorities as they're trying to get their work done from home. So there is actually a few things that we are helping our clients to do under the communication sphere. One of them being, a clear understanding of what the end user is expected to do. So, for example, leave the systems online and unlocked and on power, for example, not on the battery. Make sure it doesn't go to sleep. You have a specific window in which some patching tools can only run at a specific time of the day. They need to be online at that particular point. So you have to have that into consideration. And actually teaching them how to handle VPN dropouts. Because again, if the VPN is not running and the device is set to do that patching at that particular time and it drops, it's only going to talk to your corporate WSUS server, as an example. And if that's not available, the device isn't getting patched. So what we're doing is we're helping our clients to offer some flexible communication, snoozes, corporate branding. Users aren't always used to seeing a pop-up on the screen, and that anxiety just accentuates when they see something coming up for the first time that says, hey, your machine is being updated and you need to reboot. And they're concerned because that looks like ransomware to someone who's never seen it before. So you need to provide clear messaging, snoozes, so the users can do the patching and the reboots at their convenience, but making sure that they actually do it. And one thing we're helping our clients to do, it's actually really cool. We've helped a client to design a cool backdrop to the corporate desktop on their PC. And we've added a few things about what they should do. For example, you should be working from home, instructions for running the VPN, how to launch Office, who they should contact in an issue. And we're using our cloud deployment to send that to the device and make it the active window for this time being. So there's lots of ways. Email works, but not everybody reads emails at the right time. So having something that comes up on the screen is actually the most sophisticated way of getting someone to do something.
Yeah, such a actually really simple idea, but makes so much sense, right? Now, obviously, if you are using a next generation cloud-based patching product like Syxsense or any of the other companies out there, you're not going to have most of these problems. The issues occur primarily when you're dealing with legacy premise-based products, such as WSUS and again, some of the other legacy products out there. Diane, do you have any comments on kind of some of the challenges that you've been seeing with premise-based tools as we adapt to this new reality?
Actually, one of the first things I want to do is take something off of people's worry list. I think you know that if you have Windows 10 devices out there, you're not just pushing down patches, you're pushing down full updates of an OS, which is going to be huge over VPNs at this time, at any time. And what Microsoft has actually done is delay retiring support for 1809. So if you know exactly which versions of Windows 10 you have on all of your devices, if you were to patch an out of support one like 1709, that is wasted effort. Those patches automatically roll back because the device isn't in support. So you'll be vulnerable on those. But the good news in all of that is Microsoft's delayed 1809 and 1803, so you're still in good shape on those. Also being able to package up your feature updates and send them at a specific time to put it under your control.
Yeah, so if you do have an out-of-date Windows 10, those patches will actually come down the pipe, so it's going to chew up all your bandwidth, install, and then when you reboot, they automatically uninstall because you're on an unsupported version, right? So,
poof, gone.
Yeah, that's going to create a lot of challenges, I would imagine, for organizations. Again, with all the users at home. For people that are using these legacy products or maybe WSUS, are there any things that we can advise organizations to do, maybe to help prepare for Patch Tuesday? Are there ways to reconfigure WSUS perhaps so that it doesn't use the premise WSUS servers for content that might help? Anyone like to comment on that? John?
Yeah, mentioned it briefly earlier, but it is very possible to configure WSUS to instead deliver the updates directly from Microsoft. It may still require, of course, just like your policy, because that's what it's dependent on, a number of configuration steps to get this to work. So classifications would still be brought down, but unfortunately, if you're using one standard method for WSUS, it will also affect the devices that are still on the network. So if this was a brand new fleet that had been distributed to all the end users remotely, then every device that's back on the network, including servers, would also get that same configuration. So it's kind of a trade-off. So do you want to allow majority of the fleet externally to download the updates directly from Microsoft with a small number back at home, or vice versa?
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting. Rob, I know that you've been dealing with some clients that are having issues with patching at the moment, and they're in the process of moving over to Syxsense, but you've been kind of helping them while they're in that migration phase with their legacy product as well. Maybe you could comment a little bit.
Yeah. So VPN isn't just for patching, and it would be wrong to assume that the VPN tunnel is there for security. Actually, it's there so that staff can perform their jobs, that they can access the intranet, that they can fill in forms. This is just IT staff, as I mentioned earlier on. Now, if that mechanism is effectively used up by the WSUS or by your patching strategy, then users can't work. And we've actually had clients crash completely their VPN system by trying to throw down these very, very large updates to their machines, trying to get them ready to work from home. So these machines weren't ready to go home, but they are, because everyone suddenly was told to stay at home. And the only way these machines can be prepared is via the VPN. So if you don't have antivirus, key, absolutely key. If you don't have antivirus updates on your machine, if you don't have the firewall and the disk encryption, you depend on your VPN. There's no other way of doing it other than to doing it manually, which is simply not possible in even a medium-sized organization. There's such an unprecedented load right now for the VPNs. Actually, you could be looking at an incredibly large bill for simply adding more users to your concurrent license cost, simply to make the system available to be managed securely.
Yeah, just to be clear though, if you're using a cloud-based management product, you would not have these same issues, right? Because you're not putting that traffic through the VPN. So
right, it could be reserved for text. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an issue for WSUS and some of the legacy products that we want people to be prepared for when Patch Tuesday hits. And as we've learned today, the first Patch Tuesday is actually the Office one, which is next week, and then the second Patch Tuesday the week after that. So,
yep. And 0 days.
yeah, absolutely. Rob, any more comments about things that you think companies should be doing to prepare for Patch Tuesday?
Well, it's all in the prep now. It's all in the preparation. So if your users are at home and you're using WSUS, an example, or other non-push based systems management tools, you need to start planning the policies for when those devices should come in, because traditionally you have a window, you have a configuration, and you start allowing the patches as approved patches and devices start pulling. You need to start preparing those machines via the policy, break them up into logical chunks so that your network can handle it, that you have enough design in that strategy to allow for the testing of patches before you have issues with network contention, because if everybody comes through at once, no one is going to be patched at all.
All right, well, thank you. And I assume if you're using WSUS, you've also got limitations handling the kind of policies, right? Do you have that ability to group patches together into different levels of priority with WSUS?
Yeah, so with WSUS, it's a very corporate tool. If you integrate it into SCCM, you get a lot more functionality, but in its most basic form, you're very limited by what you can approve, when you can deploy, when machines come in, and actually WSUS is more dependent on GPO more than anything, hence why you have an absolute need for VPN. And I think the default strategy for pulling policies is 90 minutes. I could be wrong, but that means that you can't deploy now. You have to hope that the machine picks up the policy. So anything like a 0 day is actually specifically dangerous for systems that are using policy-based system delivery models.
Yeah, absolutely. Though when the device reconnects, I think it can probably pick up the policy then, right? But of course, that gives you then a bunch of traffic going across the VPN that you're not controlling. So it's a whole different issue again. All right, excellent. Well, what we're going to do is to take a few questions to the panel. So if you have any questions, please use the chat function in GoToWebinar and ask questions. And I'll hand things to Heidi, who's moderating, to ask any of the questions that are coming through.
Thank you, Ashley. We did have one. Somebody said, Rob had just mentioned it. Somebody said that I heard there's a 0 day VPN Microsoft patch last week, but it's not available in Windows Update. Why isn't it available, and how do I get it?
All right, Rob, do you want to address that one?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. There was a 0 day, couldn't come at a worse time. It was marked as an optional patch, and it was specifically for users that are using VPN software. So VPNs became unreliable or were unnecessarily slow, and you couldn't work out why. It was actually to do with a particular OS vulnerability. Because it was optional, the recommendation by Microsoft was to download it only if you experience an issue. And their recommendation was to download and install it to each of those machines, which of course means you have to have an admin account on the device itself in order to install it. Alternatively, if your tool set provides it, as I said, Windows Update and WSUS didn't offer it immediately. You would need to deploy it via some kind of software distribution mechanism to actually deploy that patch to the devices that are needing it.
Great. Thanks, Rob. So if you have any more questions coming in, Heidi?
Yes, somebody asked, what's an acceptable method for a phased patching approach?
That's probably with Rob again.
Okay, a phase. Okay, so it's, if you're going to have a phased patching approach, it's all about the selection criteria of your patches. I mentioned before that you should have your selection criteria to rank vulnerabilities based on their severity, and I mentioned that you can use the vendor severity and the CVSS. What I didn't mention was that we are actually scoring our own vulnerabilities as well using weaponized information. We're learning that vulnerabilities are actually being weaponized, so those patches should take a priority. That does mean that you don't just now focus on critical and high severities, because some of those weaponized vulnerabilities are low and medium. You now need to factor that in. In a perfect world, you would have test devices, and those test devices would have some kind of patch steering meeting where you would get feedback from the users. This isn't available in every tool, unfortunately, because it's either deploy or it's not. But what you would do is you would have a gradual deployment throughout the business with the ranking of the most serious vulnerabilities first. And when you get to your point of maturity, that means that the patch Tuesday comes around and you're waiting for the next patches, you start rolling those out. So it's all about breaking your systems up. I don't recommend installing IT devices first, because this is an absolute no-no, because they're the devices that you're using to do patching. So don't please use your own, but you do have in every business some friendly IT staff.
So I know we've got a few more questions, so back to Heidi.
Paul asked, we have people working from home that will not be connecting via VPN. What security risk is there directing people's updates through the firewall to the WSUS server? Just NATing port 8530.
Who wants to answer that one?
So that's basically the equivalent of just opening up port 80. So it's an unsecured protocol. That itself is just a major vulnerability. At least shifting to grab a certificate in some way and encrypt the server if no other method is available, which I think switches it over to 8531. That would be a better recommendation rather than leaving it unsecured.
But I assume there you still don't have the control over which patches are being installed, and you also have issues potentially with third-party patching as well, because WSUS, of course, is going to help you with the operating systems, but it's not going to help you with any of your third-party products as well.
Exactly.
So you've still got a lot of exposure, I would think. Heidi, any more questions?
Yes, and I apologize if I mispronounced your name. Faseha asked, can I use Syxsense Secure to scan unmanaged devices?
Diane, maybe, would you like to answer that one?
Can you use Syxsense Secure to scan unmanaged devices? No, you'd need a license for each of those devices. So,
but correct me, you are able, I think, to be able to scan to detect devices,
absolutely.
at least on the corporate network, home users, that would be a lot more challenging, right? Because we wouldn't know that they existed unless they had an agent installed on them. So even though Syxsense has an agentless model that's would work in the corporate environment, for home users, you would require an agent on those devices.
Right.
Okay, Heidi.
Where should patch content be delivered from?
The cloud, the vendor.
John.
Yeah, absolutely. As everything we've been saying, not storing the updates on premise, because that's going to be the major contention point. Not only do you have patch content that needs to be sent down to the machines, but policies, configurations, antivirus policies, other solutions that may also be leveraged to secure the endpoints, and those all take up data. So if there's one major thing to do to alleviate that, it's to pull that content not on premise, but it's somewhere else. Use a cloud-based solution instead. Even just delivering them directly from Microsoft, but still having that ability to pick and choose which updates should come down, that'll give you the best strength.
I think we have time for one final question. Heidi?
Yes, Joe asked, strategy for patching Linux, Mac, iOS, and Android.
Rob, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so the strategy for Linux, Mac, and Android, is that correct? Okay. I actually became a Linux fan about a year ago, but the strategy is hugely different from the perspective that Microsoft is releasing content on a monthly basis. And actually, depending on your flavor of Linux, they can actually be releasing patches every single week. The good news is the operating system is so much nicer to deploy to. So you have the same strategy for the selection criteria. You still have your vendor severity, although that's very rarely critical these days. If you look at a lot of Linux vulnerabilities, they're not critical, they're just high or important. Critical is normally saved for the most serious of vulnerabilities. But so you have your selection criteria based on that weaponization we mentioned, and then you would roll it out. But with Linux, I would recommend that you have a cycle that is greater than 1 month, because with Linux, as a vulnerability is superseded, the older vulnerability almost becomes uninstallable, not installable, because Linux knows it has another update which you should prioritize, and that's why the cycle should be vastly accelerated on the Linux platform.
All right, well, we're out of time. I'd like to thank the panelists for joining me today. I'd like to thank you for joining us today. Again, if you are not familiar with Syxsense, we'd love to have you trial our solution. And for people who attended the webcast today live, we are offering an extended trial to allow you to get your organization through this unusual situation of COVID-19. So we're actually offering people attending today's live webcast a trial of the product that is extended and full featured to get you all the way through, so you can get your organization patched and secured. So sign up for a trial at syxsense.com if you don't want to have to deal with all the problems that we've been talking about today on this webcast, because we solve those. And again, if you attended the trial, we'll be in contact with you and extend that trial for you and open it up. So we'd love to have you take a look. With that, again, thank you for attending today's webcast. And if you missed any of this, recording will be sent out later. Thank you. Bye-bye.